Hi, my name is Cyrus, and I'm the exhibit's futurist at Impression 5. That means I spend most of my time kind of behind the scenes working with our absolutely awesome exhibits team there in our exhibit shop, creating and making the new exhibits that you come to Impression 5 to see. I'm going to talk a little this morning about what I do when I'm not at Impression 5, though. When I'm home, one of the things I've done is I plant trees. Over the years, my family and I have planted hundreds and hundreds of trees on our land, and I thought it would be interesting to take you for a little walk this morning and look at some conifer trees and talk about some of the differences between pine trees and spruce trees. So when you're in the park or up north or anywhere where you can find conifer trees, you'll be able to tell the difference. So come along with me right now and we'll go look at some trees. The first tree we're going to start with is this one, and in identifying a conifer tree, one of the first places we look is at the needles. You'll notice this tree has a long straight needles. We can see there's some new growth here coming out on the end of the branch. The long straight needles tell us that this is probably a pine tree. But there is one way that's a much more definitive way of telling that it's pine. And we're going to come right down here and look closely at it. We have to get up close on right where the needles come out of the stem. We can see that there is a single attachment point there. And then there are multiple needles coming out of that attachment point. And on this tree there are 5. And those 5 needles tell me that this is a white pine. The white pine is a native tree in Michigan. It's also the state tree of Michigan. The needles on white pine are very soft. Another important detail to look for is the cone from the tree. This is a white pine cone. It's quite a distinctive cone. It's a little different from other pines. So looking for both the needles, the number of needles, and the cones are good ways to identify any conifer tree. Now we're going to go to another tree, and we look at it from a distance here. We can see that it looks quite different from what we looked at with the white pine. What differences can you see in it? One thing we can see quite clearly is that it does not have long needles. It has short needles. And the needles are slightly curved. Again, we can see new growth out on the tips of these branches because it's springtime. And we're going to look then, to be sure, we're going to look at the base of the needles, just like we did with the white pine. And on these, we can see that there aren't multiple needles. At each attachment point, there is only one needle. Spruce and fir trees have a single needle at each attachment point. Another little test we can do, we can pull one of these needles off, and I can roll it between my thumb and finger. And it kind of rolls over itself. And it rolls over itself because it's a kind of square shape. And that allows it to roll between my fingers. But a fir tree, we can tell the spruce from the fir because the fir has a flat leaf and it won't roll. So those are the a couple of major differences that help us to recognize these two different types of trees, between a pine and a spruce. And then this is actually a Norway spruce we're looking at, and it's not a native of Michigan. This is the cone from the Norway spruce. These are quite a common tree in Michigan, even though they're not native. And the cone, you can see, is quite distinct from the pine cones. It's a long, slender cone. The leaflets on these are softer on spruce cones, so it's easy to tell the difference in the cones. This is our next tree that we come to, and as you can see, looking closely at it again, we can see that it's a short needle tree. The needles are slightly curved. And out on the ends of this we see new growth. Out on the ends of the branches we have new growth. We can actually see on this tree where some new pine cones are beginning, or new cones are beginning to develop. We're going to look down at the stem on this again and see if we can identify exactly whether this is a pine or a spruce. So we'll go right in here, and from here we can see that these have a single attachment point, a single needle at each attachment point. That tells us it's a spruce. And in this particular case, we can see the ends of the new growth are kind of light blue color. This is a blue spruce. Blue spruce is a native tree of North America, although it has been transplanted to Michigan. It wasn't really a native in Michigan. It comes from the western states. Blue spruce produces a rather small cone, but you can see it still looks like a fir cone, has soft leaflets, and a longer, narrower shape, just similar to the larger cone of the Norway spruce. So looking at the needles and the cones and the base of the needles down there on the stem, once again. This is the last tree we're going to look at today, and so I'm going to quickly start out by identifying it by looking at the needles. Again, we see that they're long, straight needles. When we come in here close up, we can see that they are multiple needles coming out of each attachment point. On this particular tree, there are 2 needles. So we know it's not a white pine because the white pine has 5. This is actually a Scots Pine, which is also a native tree. And this tree, I chose to look at it because it's producing new cones right now. We can see that there are some of last year's cones still hanging here. And right up here is this year's cones. Pine trees and fir trees produce both male and female cones. The male cones are the kind of pink structure at the end of the new branches, where the new needles are coming out. The cone forms at the base of those, and that's the male. That pollinates the female cone, which is the smaller green one right down here. And let's see if I can get a better shot of that. There we are. There's the pink colored male cone above it, and then the female cone. Now the pollen will fall down from that male structure onto the female structure and pollinate the cone, and the female cone will then be the one that stays on the tree until next year and produces seeds like this one, the mature cone here. So this concludes our look at pines and spruces this morning. Well, thank you for joining me this morning on our little walk and talk about conifer trees, and I hope it was helpful to you to learn a little about telling the difference between pine and spruce trees. And don't forget to come back here next week, because Hallie will be taking us on a tour around Lansing, looking at some of the art that's available around Lansing. Thank you. Bye-bye.